Okay. Hello, YouTube. My name is Bethany, and I am studying for my South Carolina real estate exam, so I couldn't find many videos on YouTube specifically about the South Carolina real estate exam. So I figured I'd make a video to help myself study, and maybe somebody else might be able to use it to help them study. I already did take the exam once, and I actually failed it by 1 point. I passed the national because I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I watched like prep agent videos and a few others, which I'll figure out and list later. And they really helped me to prepare to pass that national exam. I did pretty well on it. I think I didn't get the exact score that I got, but I did fail the South Carolina part because I did not really study. I kind of just did what we went over in class, and I guess it wasn't enough. So I have gone through the book, which they gave us in school, which is this book right here, Aware in South Carolina. Not sure who the author is, Charles something. So this is the book that we had for school, and this is what I have gone through every chapter that they told me was South Carolina specific, and taken notes on the vocabulary and done the questions at the end of the chapter. So that's what I'm going to use to as a guide to study, and hopefully it'll go well. Okay, so we're going to start right now with chapter 1 in this Aware in South Carolina book. It's basically just about agency, which everybody should know if they've studied for the national exam, but I'm just going to go over it because it's some South Carolina specific stuff. So, agency in South Carolina. These are my notes. Got some notes here. Okay. In 1988, certain activities became legal that were not allowed under common law. There are still some ties to common law, but the differences are significant. The law states that where there is conflict, the statute supersedes the common law. So I guess common law is what they had before this. Okay. So there are 5 types of permissible brokerage relations in South Carolina. And everybody should know these, but if you don't, they are seller agency, which is the listing agent, buyer agency, disclosed dual agency, which is legal but not just dual agency, it has to be disclosed, designated agency, and transaction brokerage. This is the little thing about unavoidable conflicts. It says, when there are 2 or more buyers interested in the same property, they are all clients and they are competing in a single real estate transaction. The associated licensee is required to give a written notice to each client that neither will receive the confidential information of the other. So to the buyer and the seller. Basically, you become like a transaction brokerage in that situation. It's basically a designated agency, or disclosed dual agency. I mean, a designated agency is when there's 2 agents from the same brokerage that one represents the seller and one represents the buyer. That's a designated agency. Okay, so I'm not sure what this is. It says dual agency consent form, dual agency agreement, which is the same thing. It says must be signed by the buyer before the offer is written, and signed by the seller before signing the sales contract. So it needs to be signed by the buyer before the offer is written, and signed by the seller before signing the sales contract. Pretty sure that'll be on the test. Okay. Duties become limited. Some fiduciary duties are limited in disclosed dual agency, which I thought was really cool because we did like the old CAR. I don't know if you can see that, but so the old part of CAR, which is obedience, loyalty, and disclosure, become limited because they're old, right? And then what's provided in full is the CAR part, which is confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care. So just in case you're confused about what fiduciary duties are, they are obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care. Okay. And then I have here designated dual agency is not legal when, there's a few things here, when the broker in charge is personally assisting the buyer or the seller, or when one associated licensee acquired both the seller and the buyer as clients of the firm, or when two associated licensees are on the same team and each is working with one of the clients. Okay, now designated dual agency must be signed, which we already just went over, but it must be signed, we'll go over it again, by the buyer before an offer is written and by the seller before the seller signs the sales agreement. Okay, so basically in a dual agency it becomes transaction brokerage. So what transaction brokerage is also known as customer service. So that's like when you have somebody that doesn't want to enter into a contract, like the buyer's rep or any of the other representative contracts, then they just remain a customer. So you do transaction brokerage, which is a written agreement that is not required, but one may be used if desired. So you don't have to have it in writing, but if you want to get paid, then you better have it in writing. So there's no specific components are required by law. You should, however, contain the firm's obligations to a customer and state that the relationship created is not an agency relationship. The law presumes that a buyer or seller is a customer of the brokerage firm at the time of the first substantive contact. So that's when substantive contact is when they start telling you personal stuff about themselves and their situation as far as buying or selling, or why they're selling, or why they're buying, or anything that's personal information. Okay. A firm may be a single agent to one party in a transaction, giving the other party customer service, or the firm may facilitate the transaction between two customers without representing either party. Okay, firm's duties in a transactional brokerage for customers. They are, let's see, it says most of the duties are comparable to the duties to third parties under common agency law. Some more extensive duties are, and these ones are important to remember, honesty and fair dealing, accounting of all funds, using skill, care, diligence in the transaction, disclosing material adverse facts, and presenting all written offers and counter offers promptly. Licensees are not required to disclose latent defects, and buyers should be advised to inspect the property or hire someone to inspect it for them. All right, compensation agreement. To get paid, it is required when a firm facilitates a transaction between an unrepresented buyer customer and an unrepresented for sale by owner customer, because there are no clients. It must contain the amount of compensation and identify the party responsible for payment. It must be signed by the agent and the compensating party. All right, single agency only, which is a rare thing. Some brokerage firms do adopt a single agency only policy. They refuse any type of dual agency. So there are some that don't do it in South Carolina, and it is illegal in some states, but not in South Carolina. You can do disclosed dual agency. I think some people just worry about the the tangle and the complications, so they just don't want to get involved in it. But it's rare. Most brokerage firms do disclose dual agency. Okay. All listing agreements, buyer's representation agreements, and sales contracts are required to contain an acknowledgement of receipt of the disclosure of brokerage relationship form. So you have to give them a form and make them sign it, which we already went over. Okay. All right. I guess I must now be on the vocabulary. This is the first chapter I did, so it's kind of weird. I don't know. Let's see. Ministerial acts. Just kind of like a definition. Include writing or ministerial acts. Include writing and conveying offers and providing information and aid concerning other professional services not related to the real estate brokerage services being performed for a client. Licensees who represent one party to a transaction may perform ministerial acts for the other party without creating an agency relationship. Okay, so now we're on to the South Carolina terms, which are just basically definitions, vocabulary. Okay, so here we are. Agency duties. Old car, which is your fiduciary duties, are obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care. Okay, and now we have an associated licensee. An associated licensee is a real estate licensees that are associated with a brokerage. Okay. Client, also known as the principal, is one for whom professional services are rendered. In real estate transactions involving a fiduciary agency relationship, the client is the buyer or the seller retaining the services of the real estate broker and is more accurately and precisely defined as the broker's principal. Yes, because as an agent, your principal is actually the broker in charge. So it gets a little bit confusing. All right, compensation agreement. This is required for a brokerage firm to receive payment when facilitating a transaction between an unrepresented buyer customer and an unrepresented for sale by owner customer. A customer is a consumer who does not sign an agency contract. Customer service is called transactional brokerage. And then we have down here, it says customer services include honesty, fair dealing, accounting of all funds, using skill, care, and diligence, as well as disclosing material adverse facts. Okay. Disclose dual agency, which we already went over, is legal in South Carolina. This happens when a buyer client or unrepresented buyer wants to buy a property owned by a seller client of the brokerage. The associated licensee must become a neutral mediator. They cannot advocate on behalf of one client over the other and cannot disclose either client's confidential information concerning price negotiations, terms, or factors motivating either client in the transaction. And then we have designated agency, which is also legal in South Carolina. It is another option for when a buyer client or unrepresented buyer want to buy a property owned by a seller client of the brokerage. The broker in charge sends two subagents, licensees, to the transaction. One represents the seller, one represents the buyer. Fiduciary duties are intact. This is a good thing. You don't make as much money as an agent, but it's really the best for the clients. It controls the conflict that can be created by disclosed dual agency. It is a much better choice for the client because it gives each client full representation. So that's what I would choose if I was in that situation as one of the clients. Okay, material adverse fact. A material adverse fact is a fact that, if known, may cause a buyer to make a different decision regarding purchasing a property or the amount offered for the amount offered. An example would be facts affecting the title, facts affecting the physical condition of the property, and environmental hazards. For a specific example, we could say water damage to flooring, structural damage from insects, poor foundation, or a crack in the foundation. My battery is low. It says I only have 30 seconds. Okay, so I guess we're going to have to make a part 2 to this video. So let's just end it here and make a part 2. Okay.